One night, as my girlfriend, now wife, laid in bed, we sensed something next to us. We normally lay on our sides, but that night we were laying on our backs, faces towards the ceiling. Our eyes opened up, and we turned our heads at the same time to the space next to her side of the bed. Whatever it was took off fast. It went from her side of the bed, right next to my wife, down the side of the bed, up over our feet area, and out our closed bedroom door. What was really cool was the vertical window blinds adjacent to the bed where the spirit was swayed as the spirit went by them. Kind of like if you ran your fingers on them from right to left. The energy was not only great enough for us to sense exactly where it was, but also great enough to cause physical movement of the vertical blinds. It happened so fast, but we followed it with our heads and eyes as it moved out of our room, even though it was invisible, just pure energy. I think about this occurrence a lot. It's not the first paranormal experience for me or my close family, but it certainly was the most impactful. After it exited the room, my wife freaked the hell out and started to cry as she grabbed me for comfort. I was startled by what happened, but I never felt in danger or ill will from it. Whatever or whoever it was just as startled from what I can tell. We haven't experienced anything like it since. So, our oldest kid was about 4 years old, and ever since he could speak, he would complain about the wind in his bedroom, even when everything was closed up. Windows, ventilation. When he started sharing his bedroom with his little brother, things got worse. His little brother, 2 at the time, couldn't speak, speech delay, but would cry a lot. As in, it was difficult to get him to sleep, and he would wake up at least 5 times every night crying. This went on for about a year when we moved because of work. We prepared for the worst-case scenario and expected little brother to even cry more. Surprise. He slept like a baby from the very first night, never cried again. After we lived in our new home for a couple of months. Big brother was 5 now and little brother 3. We went for a walk in the park. Out of nowhere, big brother starts talking. Do you remember in our old house that I couldn't sleep? That was because of the wind. He paused for a little while and then went on. Little brother always cried because of the wind. He was scared of the wind. Another pause. Yeah, the wind always wanted to play hide and seek with us and wouldn't let us sleep. He would also wake us up to play. I don't know if he was a boy or a girl. He had boy clothes, but had long hair. So I'm here to tell you about an experience I had with paranormal activity, which took place back on 2006. So I was 18 years old, and I was living with my brother in a building which had 2 apartments, 2 floors. In the lower one there was us, and on the second floor my cousins, my uncle, and my aunt. Every summer, my cousins, aunt, and uncle used to go on vacation at their home village, so the house was completely empty for 3 months, and no one was living there. My aunt's bedroom was built right above our bedroom, brother and me, and 3-4 times a week when we were playing video games, we used to hear heavy steps right above us aunt's bedroom. As said before, there was no one living in the apartment, and it was locked up for many days. Also, there wasn't any buildings built next to this one, so it couldn't be our neighbors. We couldn't explain the situation, so we decided to investigate it. We did some research, and finally we bought a professional microphone which detects some specific frequencies in order to detect something paranormal. My father had a separate key of my aunt's apartment for emergency reason. So we took it and opened the apartment, set the microphone up, and waited. If a non-paranormal sound, cars from outside, our voices, etc., took place, we did notes so there wouldn't be any misunderstandings. Also, we were setting the microphone in the bedroom near 3 a.m. for 1 or 2 hours. First night, we heard nothing. Second night, also nothing. Third night, same story. But the fourth night, we heard something that froze our blood. I went into the room and said the following question. What's your name? I want an answer. Then left and sat with my brother and cousin in the living room. 3 hours went by, and when we checked the recording 10 minutes after my questions, we heard 4 loud steps, a weird noise like the lips of someone who's very close to a microphone, and then a clear name. Giota, Greek name. We freaked the hell out. We never thought we would catch something like that, and we were terrified. After that, we never did this again because we were pretty scared. And also we read on a site that if you start talking to him, you should end it right away because it ain't no good. 4 months went by, and we never told anyone or showed the recording about this incident until our grandma randomly said about someone called Giota that used to live in this apartment. When we asked about her, she told that this woman died at the age of 26 many years ago. This incident still haunts me every goddamn night. I really don't believe in ghosts or stories that I read on the internet. But even now, as a grown man, I still wonder what happened that day. This is a story I do not often tell. I promise, sincerely, that this has scarred me for life, and although I have looked into psychological explanations for what I heard and natural explanations for what occurred, they remain unsatisfactory. When I was a child, I was scared of the dark. I swore to my mother I heard voices in it. They were not evil, but they were not familiar, and so they scared me. It was not uncommon in the middle of the night for me to wake up and hear whispers, as I would call them when asking my mom. She figured they were just bumps in the night and typical kids' nightmare material. I tried often to explain to her that it was more than that they sounded different from one another the way people's voices do. On some nights, I would get so scared from these whispers that I would sleep in my mom's bed with her. It was an added bonus that the bathroom was directly outside of her bedroom door for my late-night tinkles. I should add at this point that when walking out into the hall to go to the bathroom, you look directly down the stairs that would lead you into my living room on the first floor, as my mom's bedroom was on the second floor. On one such night, around Christmas, I awoke and felt the need to relieve myself. I walked out from the door and distinctly heard the phrase, "Look," and to my astonishment, a red light, almost like a spotlight, was cast upon the wall at the very bottom of the stairs. The light had no other source. It was by itself, and I was transfixed by it. Being a little kid, and it only being a few days from Christmas, I knew what this light was. It was Santa. How else could he get into my house to know I was being a good boy? I was so excited I began walking down the stairs to greet him, picking up my pace after the second step as it began to creep off the wall and fade into the darkness in my living room. That's when I heard him. A very strong masculine voice. Different from the first. Not at all like my father's. Not to say he isn't masculine. It was just distinctly different. It said, "Stop, right now. Go back up those stairs." I listened, turned around, and what happened next I am not sure I would believe if someone had told me this same story. After reaching the top of the stairs, I heard a very loud crash that sent me running back to my mother's bed, where I jumped straight under the covers and stayed there the whole night. When we awoke the next morning, the poinsettia lights, little Christmas flower lights that glowed red, my mother had put on the railing down the stairs, were pulled straight down to the bottom of the stairs, some broken from what seemed like a forceful tear, laying in a single pile. The dry sink in my living room had fallen from the wall. My mother could not explain it. My father was worried we had been the victims of a home invasion. My sister was crying. There was nothing missing. Nobody had broken in. There did not seem to be any reason this had happened. And then I saw it, and I kept quiet about it because I was so afraid that I could not force words out of my mouth. There, on the edge of the wooden dry sink, which had been facing up, were 3 indentations where the finish on the wood had been worn, almost as if in a forceful grip. Something down there had grabbed it and threw it down. That was what the bang was. I was mortified. After that day, I never heard a single voice again. I do not like to imagine what was waiting downstairs for me that night, if it was anything at all, but I can tell you that the reality was that something had physically acted upon 2 things in my house near the bottom of that stairwell. After this, I had never heard another whisper again, which is sad because in some ways I would have liked to thank the man that had stopped me from going down those stairs. This happened when I was 7. I am 20 years old now, and because of this incident, I am still afraid of the dark. My parent moved a lot due to work, but I stopped living with them and lived with my grandma instead. Dad's office always gives a free house to stay in whenever they move. And this one time they moved in a small town, but the office house was located in the area where people rarely lived. The house itself was old. It had a huge door and huge windows, just like a really old house in war times. It was my 3rd visiting, and I always liked the house because of how breezy it was due to big windows. And my favorite spot was a room that they didn't use in the middle of the house. It only served as small storage, but the place was really breezy and comfy. One time I took an afternoon nap there, closed the grid on the window so the sunlight wouldn't get through, but it was still breezy. I slept on the floor with a pillow, next to a very big mirror. I felt someone caressing the back of my head, and it felt really good. So I thought it was my grandma because she used to always do this when I was sleeping. I ignored it and continued to take a nap, but as I tried to sleep, I could feel the texture of the hand turn into somewhat rough, like a very wrinkled but stiff hand, and I woke up because it started hurting. When I opened my eyes and saw the reflection in the mirror, it was an ugly hand, like one of those zombie hands in the movies. Pale, lot of wounds, and the nails were long. I jolted out of the room so fast into the front of the house. Then I remembered that my grandma wasn't even there to visit me. After that, I never sleep in a room where I can see a mirror or anything that can reflect anymore. If I stay in a hotel and there is a mirror in there that I can see from where I sleep, I cover it with towel or something. When I was 10, my best friend Amy had a little sister, Tessa, who disappeared. Late one night, their mom felt a draft in the house, and when she went downstairs to investigate, she found the front door wide open. Tessa was gone. There were no clues, no evidence. The girl had vanished. Initially, there was talk of abduction, but the family kept their house locked and the girls didn't open doors for strangers. Police found no sign of a break in or struggle. Tessa was the kind of kid who saved animals. Baby birds, turtles, deer, whatever. She was always hearing some poor injured creature's cries and following them into the woods that surrounded the house. So everyone thought she'd just ventured outside on her own and had gotten lost. When months passed with no real progress on the case, Amy's parents went missing too. But in a different way. They drank too much and slept incessantly, crippled by guilt and misery. Amy rarely saw them. It was some fishermen who finally found Tessa a few miles down the river. It wasn't easy to identify her body, and even after the autopsy, nobody was sure what had happened to her. Well, at least now they have closure, everyone said. Amy didn't see it that way. She called me shortly after the funeral, sobbing and choking on her breath. "I think Tessa's still alive," she said. "I heard her crying last night, outside in the woods. Nobody believes me." I believed her, but I didn't think it was Tessa. I thought it was her ghost. I agreed to sleep over at Amy's house that night. I brought my dog along for protection, and Amy and I fell asleep with our fingers tangled in his warm fur. Something woke us up a few hours later. There was a voice outside. Faint, the words indecipherable, but it was definitely Tessa. My hands shook as I pulled on my shoes. I wasn't ready to see a ghost. As soon as Amy opened the door, my dog burst out of the house, barking like a maniac. We had no choice but to follow him into the woods. We searched around for a while, but there was no sign of Tessa. "Your dumb dog chased her away," said Amy, tears running down her face. She fled toward the house. As I turned to follow her, I tripped on something. It was a duffel bag. I forced myself to look inside. Duct tape, plastic zip-tie handcuffs, a knife, and a tape recorder. When I pushed the play button, I heard Tessa's voice crying and screaming for Amy to save her, and begging someone to let her go. This happened several decades ago. Friend got 3 of us using a Ouija board. Thought it was goofy fake. As it got weirder, wondered if there might be some kind of unintentional subconscious influence happening. Started harmless but got darker. Many spirits became threatening over time and began to admit to being the same individual. I felt I was being pranked, so quit. Third friend, not the instigator, seemed weirdly obsessed and wanted to do it more and started doing it alone. Then one night at an outdoor party, the instigator got it out with the obsessed friend for a spooky laugh. There were about 10 teenage boys watching, mocking, and laughing. Spirit eventually identified as the usual negative spirit and used some new names that many years later I saw associated online with demonic entities. Anyway, Spirit got really pissed by the mocking and insulting comments, questions, especially from one loud friend. It also mentioned other people we knew were talking to it. Confusing. The loud friend thought we were messing with him and threatened to destroy the board. The spirit directly threatened him, so he grabbed board and broke it in 2 pieces. There was a bizarre "now what?" pause, and then the group decided we should burn the board, being the best idea for a group of drunk teens. At this point, most felt they were just going along with a joke, but some were getting freaked out. So we tried to burn the board. Would not light. Had to go to 7-Eleven and empty 2 entire containers of charcoal lighter fluid before it finally caught. As it burned, obsessed friend was visibly upset and mumbled that he knew how to make one anyway. I asked to TF, and he said it told me how. Days later, we found out a group of kids from the same high school also was on a Ouija board that night. And it also mentioned us to them, including that we had made it angry. This was before cell phones, and we were at an outdoor party, so nobody knew about other group on party night. Several more days later, the loud friend who was threatened was in serious car accident, being ejected from a pickup. He survived. As far as I know, the story ends there. I was not aware of anyone using a Ouija board after that. When my sister Betsy and I were kids, our family lived for a while in a charming old farmhouse. We loved exploring its dusty corners and climbing the apple tree in the backyard. But our favorite thing was the ghost. We called her Mother because she seemed so kind and nurturing. Some mornings, Betsy and I would wake up, and on each of our nightstands, we'd find a cup that hadn't been there the night before. Mother had left them there, worried that we'd get thirsty during the night. She just wanted to take care of us. Among the house's original furnishings was an antique wooden chair, which we kept against the back wall of the living room. Whenever we were preoccupied, watching TV or playing a game, Mother would inch that chair forward, across the room, toward us. Sometimes she'd manage to move it all the way to the center of the room. We always felt sad putting it back against the wall. Mother just wanted to be near us. Years later, long after we'd moved out, I found an old newspaper article about the farmhouse's original occupant, a widow. She'd murdered her 2 children by giving them each a cup of poisoned milk before bed. Then, she'd hanged herself. The article included a photo of the farmhouse's living room, with a woman's body hanging from a beam. Beneath her, knocked over, was that old wooden chair, placed exactly in the center of the room.